The stars were dying out here, not metaphorically, literally. Rift Station orbited the impossible. Built to study a gravitational anomaly known simply as the Rift, the station monitored fluctuations in localized space-time, a shimmering fracture in the void near Halem's debris belt. Some theorized it was a rip between parallel realities. Others believed it was the decaying scar of a failed wormhole, pulsing with residual quantum entanglements. No one could say for sure. Officially, the rift was inert, a cosmic curiosity. Unstable, yes, but harmless. That was before it responded. Talia Voss stood alone in Rift Station's observation deck, forehead resting gently against the cool reinforced glass. At 25, she was the youngest systems analyst ever assigned to the outpost, but that wasn't why people noticed her. Talia was sharp, intuitive, and known for trusting what the numbers didn't say. It was what had brought her to far away from home, and what kept her awake at night. The swollen red giant Keros 9 pulsed in the velvet dark bleeding light like a failing heart. She no longer trusted her perception of time. Was it still 26 seconds between pulses? Or had she simply trained herself to expect the rhythm? This far from Earth, 73 light-years, the rules no longer felt fixed. Even gravity here felt tentative. Rift Station clung to a fragile Lagrange point between Iskros, a dense gas giant, and Halem, its fractured former moon, now a slow-spinning field of rubble scarred by ancient kinetic impacts, anchored the fragile gravitational balance that kept Rift Station from drifting. Scientists once theorized that Halem's collapse wasn't natural. The pattern of the debris belt hinted at controlled detonation, as if something had tried to breach or contain what lay beneath. Some believed the monoliths, towering constructs buried in Halem's crust, were older than the moon itself. They resisted scans, warped topographical maps, and emitted faint radiation signatures on frequencies that matched no known natural source. A few daring surveyors claimed to have entered one and seen walls that rearranged themselves behind them. During one of those early expeditions, Ren Halvik, Rift Station's lead research director and theoretical physicist, had retrieved a fragment from a partially collapsed monolith on Halem's night side. A shard, dark and triangular, humming with faint, irregular pulses even after isolation. He'd been on the project since its inception, and Talia had known him for nearly 5 years. First as an intense collaborator, barely older than her, and later as a wary colleague. It was one of the few physical artifacts recovered without causing a containment breach. Talia had watched him hold it with something like reverence, not the awe of a scientist, but the longing of someone who thought he might finally be holding an answer. Later, in the shuttle, he had turned to her, voice low and distant, and said, "Don't log this, not yet, just keep it between us." She had nodded uneasily, already feeling the weight of what he wasn't saying. To make sense of what the rift emitted, the station had been equipped with a prototype interface known as the Rift Core, a concentrated system designed to converge every fluctuating field line from the anomaly into a single diagnostic stream. The Rift Core was buried in the deepest section of the station's spine and fed data to all outer rings. In theory, it allowed them to stabilize the region's quantum distortions. In practice, it behaved more like a translator of incomprehensible logic, responding not just to physics, but perhaps to perception itself. Over the years, Halem's broken orbit groaned through the hull like a breath. The station, an intricate lattice of alloyed rings and shielded corridors, wasn't made to house souls. It was designed to witness madness, not survive it. and Talia was beginning to feel observed in return. The first time the rift reached out, spoke in a way only quantum interference could, Talia didn't tell anyone. She was alone in calibration chamber 3. The EM seals had just reset when the interference bled through the comms, ragged, distorted, but unmistakable. Her own voice, "Don't trust them! They lied! I am you!" It wasn't a recording. The harmonics were live, fluctuating with breath and cadence. It carried the micro variations of lived experience, hers. She froze, breath stalled in her throat. The chamber, bright with sterile light, suddenly felt too narrow, too intentional, as if it had been waiting. Later, she examined the logs. The waveform matched her vocal ide with 99.8% precision. She brought the data to Ren. She didn't need to explain. He already knew what she'd seen. "Mimetic feedback," he said, scanning the logs with surgical detachment. "Common with quantum loop refraction near dense anomalies. You're hearing your own signal, refracted." Talia stared at him. "You don't believe that?" He didn't answer, but she saw the flicker in his eyes, the same look he'd had during their first monolith descent, when he stared at the rift and his jaw clenched like he'd tasted ash. That night, unable to sleep, she accessed an off-record diagnostic stream. Buried deep beneath inert system tags was a log mislabeled as a cooling cycle anomaly. The file contained a single line: "If there's a version of her somewhere else, I'll find it, even if I have to rewrite the world." She stared at it for nearly an hour, then locked it behind a passphrase she didn't remember setting. From that moment on, she stopped trusting anything without a heartbeat. The days blurred into each other, indistinct and heavy. Keros 9 pulsed. The rift shimmered at the edges of the station's observation grid. Systems stabilized, then faltered again. Talia began keeping her own log, off-grid, written by hand on a tablet she kept beneath her bunk. No one else seemed to notice the shift, the lights dimming a fraction earlier, the way the station's artificial gravity felt subtly misaligned, or how the rift's shimmer now lingered longer at the edge of the viewport. It was like reality itself had started humming in a different key, and only Talia could hear the dissonance. Irene Sato, Rift Station's systems engineer, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, logged a few minor anomalies. Tom Calder, Rift Station's lead operations officer and Talia's longtime ally, joked about ghosts in the conduits. But Talia saw it in their eyes. Everyone felt something was wrong, but no one wanted to be the first to say it aloud. She began noticing reflections that didn't sync. Sometimes her mirror self lingered a fraction too long. Sometimes her eyes blinked out of rhythm. And then came the dreams. Not fragments, full lives. Cities she'd never visited. Faces she should not know. A quiet afternoon on a beach lit by twin suns. A partner whose name always slipped away when she woke. Memories that belonged to someone else, or some version of her. She recorded herself every night now, whispering into the mic, "Talia Voss, age 25, you're still here. You're still real." But even that was beginning to feel like a ritual, not reassurance. And then the rift changed. It wasn't scheduled. No probe launch, no scan alignment. Just a sudden pulse in the observation core, followed by a silent alarm, the kind the system registered when it didn't know what else to call what it was seeing. Talia sprinted through the corridor. Tom met her halfway. "You seeing this?" he asked, breath short. She nodded. "Containment, intact, but barely." They reached the viewport in time to watch the rift shimmer. No longer a stable ellipse of gravitational warping, but something folding in on itself. Spirals of light twisted inward. And something came through. The alarms tripped. Containment flared. A body collapsed onto the deck inside the seal lock. Suit scorched. Visor cracked. Talia moved before Tom could stop her. She keyed in the override. The air hissed. The helmet slid off. The face beneath was her own, exactly her own. They rushed her to Isolation Chamber 2. The med bay flickered with emergency lighting as the bots began triage, scorched suit removal, oxygen stabilization, thermal diagnostics. Tom hovered near the glass, his breath fogging the panel. Talia didn't move. She couldn't. Inside, the woman lay still, her skin pallid, pulse shallow but steady. For long minutes, the only sound was the soft hum of the monitors. Then her eyes opened. Talia stumbled back a step. The woman didn't speak at first. She just stared at her, through her, as if checking a memory. Then, "Don't run." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." Talia found her voice. "Who are you?" "I don't know what I'm supposed to call myself in this version," the woman said, "but you can call me Nova." Talia didn't respond right away. She studied the woman, herself, but not. Nova's hair was shorter, unevenly cropped. A faint scar cut through her left eyebrow. Her eyes, same color, same shape, held something weightier. Not age, but accumulation. She looked like someone who had lost and kept losing, but refused to forget. The lines were the same, the voice a half-tone lower, worn with something heavier. "I came through the rift," Nova said finally, "not by choice. My world was collapsing, or converging. It's hard to explain." "Try," Talia said, her voice tighter than intended. Nova sat up, slowly, wincing. "Where I'm from, the rift didn't stay quiet. Ren, our Ren, activated the core. He thought he could guide the merge, stitch realities together for stability, but it doesn't work like that." Talia frowned. "The merge?" "It's what happens when timelines try to overwrite each other. At first things blur, a memory here, a shift in the station layout there, but then people start changing, or vanishing." Nova paused. "I lost someone. My partner. One morning he was just gone, erased, except I remembered him." Talia's throat tightened. She leaned forward slightly. "Why come here?" Nova's expression darkened. "Because your Ren is trying to do it too. Whatever world this is, he's chasing the same convergence. And if I made it through, others will, or worse, the bleed will pull this place under." Talia hesitated. "The bleed?" "It's what happens when the boundary between timelines thins. You don't notice it at first, just echoes, overlaps. Then reality begins to erode. You remember things that didn't happen. People blink in and out. Eventually the structure collapses. One world eats the other, but neither survives intact." "Why didn't you bring proof?" "I barely survived transit. I didn't come to persuade, I came to stop it." Talia straightened. "Then we start with Ren." She found him in the upper comms array, bent over a secondary relay console as if nothing had happened. When the door slid open, he didn't flinch. "You brought it through," she said. Ren turned. His face was calm, too calm. "She came through. That wasn't my doing." "You triggered the anomaly. You knew what it would attract." He studied her a moment. "I didn't bring her. I made it possible for her to arrive." Talia's hands clenched at her sides. "She says your merge theory destroys people, that you tried it before." "She's a fragment, Talia. You don't understand what's at stake. Do you know how many timelines tear themselves apart because no one dares to act?" Talia stepped closer. "Do you hear yourself?" Ren's voice lowered. "We live on the edge of dying stars, drifting through emptiness. We're shadows pretending to be whole. The rift doesn't just show us possibilities, it lets us correct them. By replacing lives, she said. He looked away. By giving them purpose. Talia stared at him. You didn't come here to study the rift. You came looking for someone. He didn't answer. I saw the log. You said you'd rewrite the world to find her. Who was she? His breath caught. Then, very softly, she never lived. His hands remained at his sides, trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. His eyes glazed not with detachment, but with the weight of mourning something intangible, something almost remembered. He wasn't defiant now, just hollow. Talia stayed silent, sensing more beneath his voice than the words allowed. Ren moved to the terminal but didn't touch it. In another timeline, she was real, a version of you. You weren't my subordinate. You weren't my assignment. You were my partner, my reason to stay in the field. We were working on a solution to the convergence together. He finally turned to her, voice low. She died in the bleed, just disappeared mid-sentence. No logs, no alerts. I held on to her voice for months, replaying every bite until it distorted. Then came the first pulse, the first trace. I thought maybe if I could map where she'd gone. Talia's heart pounded. Ren continued, more to himself than her. The Ren from your world. Maybe he failed. Maybe he walked away. I don't know. But I stayed. I kept building. Because if she existed somewhere, if she was still real in some layer of probability, then I owed it to her not to let that fade. He looked up at her again. And then ye appeared. Not your Nova, but someone close. A flicker, a message, one I could almost touch. Talia's voice was barely audible. So you opened the rift wider. Ren nodded, eyes fixed on the console. The core wasn't just meant to interpret field lines. I modified it to refract them, to bend probability, to see where bleed might offer structural overlap. I used fragments from the monoliths, shards that pulsed on frequencies outside measurable parameters. Their structure interfaced with the core's field regulator, allowing me to deflect quantum harmonics and map resonance paths across timelines. When we projected a convergence pattern, I tuned the harmonics to amplify the boundary fluctuations. It let more through. Not just signals, matter, consciousness, whole realities. I had to, he said, and this time the tremor in his voice was real. Behind them, the door slid open. Nova stood in the threshold, her form flickering at the edges. You're not the only one who lost someone, she said. Ren stiffened. You shouldn't be out of containment. I was never your prisoner, she replied. He stepped toward the console, voice rising. You don't know what you're undoing. I know exactly what I'm stopping. Ren slammed a hand to the terminal. Sparks flared across the interface, and a low warning chime echoed through the station. Monitors around them flickered as system integrity wavered. The rift beyond the observation grid pulsed faintly in response, as if reacting to his defiance. The station lights dimmed, fail-safe locks triggering one by one. Talia spun toward the central panel. He's locking down the core, she said. Nova moved fast. I'll hold him. Don't be reckless, Talia warned. I already died once, Nova said, her voice steady but her eyes burning. Not just erased, unwritten. I remember what it felt like to vanish from my world, from everyone's memory, except my own. If I'm here now, it's because I clawed my way through what was left. I won't let him do that to anyone else. Talia ran. Behind her, she heard the sharp sound of bodies colliding, static rippling through the air as Nova tackled Ren into the secondary junction. Sparks flared, a burst of light flickered. Nova's voice came through the comm. "Go, Talia, do what I couldn't." Talia didn't look back. She sprinted through the station's dimming corridors as emergency lights strobed red, her breath loud in her helmet. After the Rift event, and before Nova's full recovery, she and Tom had met in the diagnostics annex, an unspoken urgency pulling them both from their routines. They sat across from each other under low light, screens casting pale reflections, unsure of what they were dealing with, but unified by instinct. Talia didn't know Wren's plan, not yet, but the Rift's behavior had escalated in a way that screamed orchestration. They weren't planning a takedown, they were preparing for contingencies, for escalation, for anything. The idea of a synchronized core shutdown came up as a desperate possibility, a last resort if everything else failed. "What if we can't stop him in time?" Tom had asked, fingers tapping the schematic for the Rift core. Talia had shaken her head. "Then we don't stop him, we pull the plug." They hadn't known the full scope of Wren's plan yet, but Nova's warnings had made one thing clear. Convergence wasn't theory anymore. They needed options. That was when they discovered the dual key override buried beneath the operational lattice, an old failsafe intended for synchronized emergency shutdown during catastrophic destabilization. The plan had seemed improbable, desperate even, but it was the best they had. Tom had leaned back. "You think he won't see it coming?" She looked away. "I think he already has." Now, as she reached the Rift control core, she saw just how much Wren had anticipated their move. Every secondary process was rerouted. The airlocks had been reset with delay gates. Emergency override took nearly 10 seconds to authenticate. She paused just long enough to override the final security gate. The chamber was lit only by pulse lines snaking across the floor and ceiling, all of them converging on a column of suspended field regulators at its heart. It hummed like a living nervous system, flickering with interference. She inserted her key. The screen blinked to life. A status prompt appeared. "Second key required. West override node." Tom's voice crackled over the comm. "I'm on it. Give me 2 minutes." Wren's voice tried to cut in, scrambled and weak. "You don't know what collapse will do. You'll fracture this timeline too." Talia didn't respond. A tremor passed through the floor, an aftershock from the outer ring. Then Tom's key registered on the screen. "Core stabilizer offline." She placed her hand on the final switch. "Goodbye," she whispered, not just to the station or the Rift, but to the person she had been before all of this began. To the doubt, the uncertainty, the fear of not knowing who she truly was. She wasn't just collapsing a system, she was choosing a self, and turned the key. The core flared. A soundless pulse rushed outward, like breath held too long, finally exhaled. Across Rift Station, lights went dark in sequence, emergency systems flashing amber before fading into silence. The rift beyond the observation grid contracted, light spiraling inward until only a sliver remained, then not even that. The anomaly was gone. Talia slumped against the control column, her hand still resting on the panel. Tom's voice broke through the comm, faint but alive. "Containment field, stable, field lines are flatlining." Her voice was hoarse. "Nova?" Static, then, "She's gone." Talia closed her eyes. The deck beneath her boots no longer trembled. For the first time in weeks, the station felt still, but something in her didn't. She still dreamed of Nova, of her laughter, her silence, her grief, of beaches she'd never walked, where memory and possibility curled together like tide and foam, never quite separating. Of choices she hadn't made, and she resumed her logs, one entry every night. Not to preserve data, but to remember who she was. Sometimes her reflections still hesitated, just enough to make her heart stutter. It felt as if Nova was watching her from the other side of the glass. Maybe she had come home. In her dreams now, there were always two figures standing on the same beach beneath twin suns. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. But they always knew each other. And maybe someday, Talia would remember which one of them was real. Somewhere, beneath all the noise and consequence, that line Wren wrote still echoed in her. If there's a version of her somewhere else, I'll find it. Even if I have to rewrite the world. But Talia no longer needed to rewrite the world. She had found something better. Someone worth being, even in the fragments.